Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. What a fascinating couple of sessions we've already had. So we've got to beat those and be even more interesting. I was trying to think about how to open this, and you know, one of the interesting things about the committee, both Representative Castor and Representative Wittman are members of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. That's a mouthful.
Yes.
And it's also a dramatic title for something. And I'm just really wanted to start out this conversation asking how we got here. A lot of people fault China for this moment we're in. I'm wondering, what fault do we have? Does the U.S. Congress have? Do the private sector have for the plate? What wasn't done 20 years ago that led to the need for the creation of the committee of which you're both a member? Kathy.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the role you play in boosting American jobs and manufacturing. And it is a pleasure to be here with my good friend and colleague, Congressman Wittman. We have a lot in common, representing communities that have beautiful environments. Me from Tampa Bay. I'm on the shores of Chesapeake Bay, and we have deep military presence in our district. Mine is Central Command HQ and Special Operations Command HQ at MacDill in Tampa. We're here because America took its eye off the ball. We love the cheap Chinese products. We loved it. The American consumer was king, and at a time when the climate crisis was not central to policy in America, we were so overly reliant on fossil fuels from other countries. The geopolitics was different. People were hoping, as China came into kind of the mainstream of nations, that they would act in a normal manner, but to the contrary, under Xi Jinping, they've become more authoritarian, a more closed economy, a violator of human rights, and stealing our technology. And that has coincided with the costly, detrimental impacts of a growing climate crisis. And so we're at a point in history where we have got to be bolder, and we've got to raise our ambition.
So Rob, as you're answering the question, what I'd like you to share with us as well is not only what we got wrong in the past, but as you sort of look at the committee has this important report out: reset, prevent, build a strategy to win America's economic competition with the Chinese Communist Party. I guess what I'm interested in is, when you have limited levers to move this giant ship of the U.S. economy and what matters. So looking at the negligence, and I'm going to call it negligence, sure, of past decisions, what are the most important things we have to fix, particularly in the energy and environment space?
Well, Steve, first of all, thank you. I want to thank SAFE and the electrification group here, the Electrification Coalition, and thanks for everybody for coming to here today. It's a real honor for me to be here with my colleague, Kathy Castor, and we have quite the...
and you really like each other. You were joking around back there. I don't know if those videos that I took are going to get you in trouble, but...
Well, it's an honor for me to serve with Kathy on what I think is one of the most important committees there in Congress. And Steve, as you talk about, yes, it's been through a series of decisions and events that we find ourselves where we are today. I think it is the belief that somehow other nations would be as benign as we are in this element of what's now developed with China. Xi has consolidated power. This is not a competition. China is an adversary. They look to dominate the world. So let's call it for what it is, and let's understand, too, that that system of communism is all about achieving their ends, and they're willing to do anything to get there. We have a certain set of values in the United States. Integrity means something to us, our values and how we treat individuals, how we follow the rule of law. None of that matters to China. They will lie, cheat, and steal to achieve their ends, and they're very plain and open about that. So the challenge for us is how do we use our strengths? We have lots of them. We're the best innovators and creators in the world. We have an economy that can respond immediately. It's not a centralized top-down command and control, which is how Xi is kind of, strangling what happens there in China. I argue that ultimately we will prevail, but let's not make no mistake about the disparity of where we are in relation to China and what we have to do to catch up. I mean, we have walked while China's been running, and we've done that for a whole raft of reasons. Now what we have to do as China is running is we have to sprint to catch up. And listen, we can do that. I am very, very confident in this nation's ability to do that. But we cannot underestimate the magnitude of the challenge that we face. And it will be one of those, to use a Navy term, it will be an all-hands-on-deck moment for this nation. And we need folks across the spectrum everywhere, members of Congress, the executive branch, to call this moment to the American people and call them to task and say we all have to be in on this, because if not, the outcome is not going to be a good thing for the United States.
What are the big things, I mean, both of you, that we should be doing? And I just want to throw one thing in there. I had some great attendees, and I happened to be out way too late last night with some of you. It was I don't know if they made it yet, but they're, I talked to some folks in the private sector that are making major investments in energy transitions, in the kind of EV world, and thinking about critical minerals and all that entire supply chain of that's required to get where we need. And when you step back at it, not only do you have China in very key strangleholds along that chain, you also have something which I had not thought about, which is if you're a public company, you're watched by analysts. And if you're investing in the future, those analysts may just say that's a bad investment. And they're going to punish you as a firm for doing those things. And it has staggering implications in the behavior of capital. And I sit and I can look, I know government can matter a little bit, but government's not going to bail out everything. But how do you get the alignment through so that investment in this future is rewarded and praised and becomes a net benefit to the companies doing it, as opposed to a ball and chain around, their essentially their performance of stock? Kathy?
Boy, we could really use your help on this. The private sector, your businesses weighing in with the Congress. For the first time, we have an industrial policy. We, thanks to the IRA and the infrastructure law, we now have incentives that are luring private capital into the technologies that we need for survival on minerals, on manufacturing, on EVs, on solar and wind.
Right.
And the good news is, and I've seen these special committees really deliver. I was privileged to chair the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis for a number of years, and our policy recommendations were driven by folks like you. We did broad outreach across the economy to all sorts of folks, workers, businesses, faith community, environmental, everyone. Those policies were turned into law through the IRA. One of my proudest moments was standing next to President Biden in August 2022 when he signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. Now, and the beauty of the IRA, of course, is that it's 10 years. We really could use your help in helping build political support. There's some folks that want to chip away at it. We have got to remain focused on standing up our manufacturers and our supply chains, and it matters when it comes to China. So here comes this special bipartisan committee.
So what I'm hearing is you're worried the IRA won't survive.
No, I think it is going to survive, because look at where the investments are being made. They're being made in a lot of Republican districts. They're going to be, as the businesses and jobs flow into those districts, the IRA is going to be embraced over time.
Rob, are you pro-IRA?
Well, I think we probably have a few differences of opinion on some of those elements, but I think the place that we do agree is that there are lots of places where our government can look at policies as it relates to what I call from source to production.
Right.
And making sure that we don't look just myopically and somehow believe that everything else is going to happen in a very benign world. It's not. There are malign actors out there that seek to harm the United States. So as we look at this, we need to get back to how we produce those source materials. If you look at it today as we speak, China controls 80% of the extraction capability for critical minerals and rare earth elements and 70% of the refining capability. I was just up in northern Minnesota to a place called the Mid-Continent Rift, the largest deposition of copper and nickel anywhere in the continental United States, yet it's been 20 years since we've tried to have a permit issued by multiple administrations to actually mine that area. And yet, we will buy the same minerals from companies that mine in Africa. 16 of those 18 companies are owned by China. They are the worst human rights violators on the face of the earth, and they violate environmental standards. Now, we can do it safer, taking good care of our workers and taking care of the environment than anybody on the face of the earth, and we need those critical minerals in order to sustain things that we have to do here. Things like additive manufacturing. We have great technology to do things with metals that nobody else can do. But you know what? If China controls the supply of the metals, I don't care how good our technology is.
So, Rob, tell us what the strategy is to deal with that. We've
Sure.
been doing a lot of forums on mining, critical minerals, and the permitting issue. A friend of mine,
Yes.
in the lithium business says, North America, Canada, the United States could be the lithium powerhouse of the world if you could drill, mine anywhere. But
need-
when it comes to the lack of alignment with resources and permitting and national and commercial need and competition, how do you get everybody with their hair on fire realizing this is a fundamental, missing element in America's strategic competitiveness?
Listen, it's critical to the future of this nation. We have to reform the permitting process. I want to make sure we protect the environment. We ought to do that in a fast and responsible way. I want to make sure too that we understand what should be a priority. So it's not just on the mining side, but it's also too in making sure that there's a balance there. We have all these outside groups that continue to lock these things up in court for years and years and years. If you take this area in northern Minnesota, this is on the third company. 2 others have gone bankrupt, and it's been in a process of submit an application, do these things, do some more things, and then suits by environmental organizations. And listen, I've worked in environmental health for years. There needs to be a balance there. On the other side, too, it also needs to be on the energy production side, things like nuclear energy. The NRC is broken. If you look at what happened in Georgia with the permitting of that plant, we need small modular reactors. We need micro reactors. We need all of those things in the United States. What's happening right now is the administrative permitting process is impeding the things we need to do to compete on the world stage. And we can immediately fix those things and open the door, and we can do a lot of things and do it better, more efficiently, safer, and protecting our workers and the environment than anybody else in the world. Yet if we buy from China and other countries, we're actually exacerbating a problem. We talk about human rights violations in China. You know how we can fix that in addition to speaking out against the genocide of the Uyghurs? So we can stop buying materials from companies that exploit human beings.
Kathy, let me ask you a question about the Select Committee on Strategic Competition with China. My sense of the committee is that it is a committee that focuses a spotlight on issues, deficits, the needs to move forward. It doesn't have budgetary authority. You don't have legal, regulation, but you have lots of members that are. And so on other committees, as you are and as Rob is. And so as you're kind of looking at taking the spotlight, focusing on what the industrial policy needs of the nation are right now, how successful do you think the committee is in taking ideas from these kinds of reports and packaging them in the other committees that do have budgets? Because one of my friendly criticisms of this process is we're Morris Chong of TSMC laughed at Nancy Pelosi and said $50 billion is nothing, in the chips arena. So I'm just wondering if we're playing small ball. And whether or not we need to really amp up the resources and attention given real budgets.
Absolutely, we do. And the beauty of the Select Committee on the CCP is that it was intended from the very get-go to be a more serious committee than you see a lot of the other committee in the Congress right now. It's bipartisan. The leadership by Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin and Raj Krishnamurthy of Illinois, they have been exemplary, but they've had the support of leaders on both sides of the aisle. And this is very important because to get things done in Congress, obviously, for it to last, usually it really needs to be bipartisan. We have a lot of work to do, though, because of the political tension after the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's still not buy-in politically across the spectrum in that. But one example would be the bill that's going to come before the Congress this week on the national security threat posed by TikTok. It passed it was a recommendation from the Select Committee, a bill drafted in the Select Committee, or recommended. It was sponsored by the leadership there. It passed my Energy and Commerce Committee 50-0 last week, and it's headed to the floor. Boy, if we could do some of that on what we need to do in policy boosting when it comes to critical minerals and energy supply, that would be great. But a lot of it comes from public support, public sentiments, everything.
Right.
Yeah, listen, I think the bill that will come before the House this week sets the precedent to say there is substantive policy that's coming out of this committee. It is going to the Committee of Jurisdictions. I think it'll pass overwhelmingly. We also had 9 recommendations from the China Select Committee go through the National Defense Authorization Act. So we have set the precedents for things to happen from a suggestion side to policy to legislation. What we have to do is to build on that. I think there are lots of opportunities there. And the good news about this committee, as Kathy pointed out, is it's been almost unanimously bipartisan in the recommendations of the committee and the directives that we've placed out there. Now, there's always a little bit of tension between saying you're not a committee of jurisdiction, don't tell us what to do. But I think when you see the level of threat that people now are understanding that China places on the United States, all of a sudden you see lots of unanimity on the direction that we need to take. I think that is a good indicator of where things are to go. I think there's lots more to do, but I think what will happen this week, and I think it'll be an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote, sets the precedent for us to do even more.
A lot of what's in this report, particularly in the energy space, is around looking and safeguarding and investing in next generation technologies in energy. And a lot of what Fred Smith was up here talking about, ARPA-E kinds of things and initiatives, the national lab infrastructure and partnerships with the private sector. My experience with that arena is that it produces outstanding technological leaps on occasion that end up, the old flat panel display idea, and that, being dominated by Korean companies. And there seems to be sometimes a lack of alignment between the American private sector, the job space, and what we're producing in our fantastic research labs. Is there any discussion of that and how to kind of get greater alignment so that America doesn't just keep being the innovative powerhouse of the world and then seeing the production facilities in Shenzhen?
Well, listen, I think policy means something. I think setting the policy to make sure that the regulatory realm fits to where the direction that things need to take, make sure that you are setting the stage for folks to be able to take advantage of these technologies. I think then you can send the demand signal to the private equity firms, to the venture capitalists to say, by the way, we would want to encourage this. We're going to create a regulatory environment that's friendly to this, that encourages businesses, sometimes either to change course, sometimes it's just a modernization of certain businesses within that realm, or it's the spawning of new businesses in that realm, these innovators and creators that I talked about. So I think that's how government can send the demand signal. I mean, if you want to take the next step too, you can say, hey, listen, we're going to provide some tax incentives, and we do that in many of the areas there. I think that, we, again, are the creators and innovators around the world. We can lead the way here. And remember, China is a follower when it comes to doing this stuff. Why do they demand that when companies go to China, they hand over their IP? Is because they're behind, and how do they catch up? They tell a company, you want access to our 1.4 billion people? Hand over your intellectual property. And then all of a sudden, these companies see 4 or 5 years down the road, something showing up in the marketplace that looks exactly like what they're producing, yet it has a Chinese label on it.
Kathy?
Yeah, our national labs are the envy of the world. Aren't they fantastic? And it's getting to commercialization that's often the challenge. So that's the levers that we've had are through procurement, through tax credits, other policy settings. But there is another tool that is catching on, and that is the carbon border adjustment mechanism. It's not specifically referenced in this report, but it certainly is implied. When you think of, I was just at the Conference of Parties 28, and it's clear when you look across the globe, we're nowhere near our climate pollution reduction goals. How do we get there? Well, we need to reward domestic industries that are playing by the rules, that are following environmental laws, that are investing in that technology. And Senator Whitehouse and Congresswoman Delbeni and I have drafted the Clean Competition Act, which would authorize a carbon border adjustment here in the United States and benefit our domestic manufacturing industries. I mean, China is 4 times more carbon intensive. Russia's more carbon intensive in what they produce. Let's level the playing field for our domestic industries, and I'm hoping that that carbon border adjustment mechanism will catch on in a bipartisan way.
We've just got just a few minutes, but I want to ask you something that's been on my mind, and it has to do with environmentally responsible or socially responsible investments in these arenas, and it's something that is haunting me right now. If you go into the world of AI, if you talk to the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, who's very much around putting guardrails around AI and having ethical AI, and I asked him, I said, well, does ethical AI beat unethical AI? If you have other players in the world not with those guardrails, in the end, who gets most market share? How does that play out? In the environmental space, Joe Manchin, Senator Joe Manchin with the IRA kept going out when Joe Biden and others were saying, President Biden was saying, this is the biggest investment in renewables. And Senator Manchin would go out and said, no, this is an energy security bill. This is about all of the above. Vladimir Putin has weaponized energy, and we need to, yes, be responsible, invest in this, but understand that we're in a very unique moment. Yes. So again, and then on top of that, if you kind of go into mining, we see now efforts like being green mining may be a new direction in this of looking at new ways to, much less toxic ways to generate the materials for mining. And I'm just interested if we begin stacking in those new capabilities to be more environmentally and socially ethical and responsible, but our chief adversary isn't. Who wins? Kathy.
Yeah, this is the topic of the conference, right? The competition, and I think you do highlight there are so many innovations that we don't even understand yet. But I'm learning a little bit about what AI can mean for mining, for identifying where minerals exist, feeding in the data, and then being able to balance those ethical concerns on how you do it safely, how you engage communities early, how you provide jobs and resources to them early. I think that holds great promise.
Rob.
Steve, the answer to the question is yes, we will prevail in this situation. Remember, this isn't a competition. China looks to do this from an adversarial position. I spent 27 years in environmental health looking specifically at what happens in the environment from what human beings do. We have the technology, we have the innovation and creation to do these things safer than anybody else in the world. And I believe that we bring those resources to bear. And when we do that, it actually creates an efficiency that can't be replicated by the Chinese. And I believe that when we do that, you'll find investment will follow there. What we have to do, though, is to make sure that we send the constant demand signal and say, yes, we are going to permit these operations. We're going to show that we can do these things. If we are in a situation where we say no, 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 and the only place we have to go is to the Chinese, or as we see in Europe with the Russians in energy, then the outcome will be predetermined. But I think that we can, again, by addressing what's happening in the regulatory realm, I think that we can open the window to make sure that our U.S. companies can have the chance to show what they can do, how they can do it. And I believe that we will prevail in that situation because I do believe that folks care about the environment. I think that folks around the world said, yeah, there is a difference between what the U.S. produces and what China produces. Again, setting aside even all the human rights issues, just look at the environment. I mean, we're clearly head and shoulders above the Chinese, and especially too when it comes to energy. So I'm very confident in what we can do. Given the chance, given the regulatory opening, I believe that our companies here in the United States will answer the call and that we will be able to sadly challenge the Chinese. I believe that we will get more out of our dollar than they get per their yuan in what we need to do in this sourcing of these materials.
I still get the Sunday Washington Post in like real form. I don't just read it online. And the headline, I think it was designed for this conference, was, America's going to run out of energy, that it doesn't have the electrification, tip a hat to the Electrification Coalition, others that the, things like a national smart grid are not, have not yet moved forward. Do we need to have some head knocking among governors and utilities to get out of the inertia of that industry and begin thinking differently? And I want to tie that to the strategic competition with China, because if we don't have a base of strength nationally in our own provision of electricity domestically, doesn't that hamper our ability to
yes,
compete?
in many states, the business model is completely out of whack. It's still based on selling as much energy as possible, large capital projects rather than efficiency, upgrading lines, breaking down the interconnection queues. So
Does Florida have a white hat or black hat?
Oh, it's a
in that
black
story?
hat. We're the Sunshine State, and yet we're 75% reliant on gas right now. And electric bills for all of my neighbors are just out of sight. Putin invades Ukraine, gas bills go up, and boy, if you're hooked on gas to power your economy, you are just hammered, and it's trickled down.
Rob, is Virginia hero or villain in this?
Listen, I think Virginia is going to be leading the way. I was just last week at a company called BWXT. They make the nuclear reactors for aircraft carriers and for submarines. There's a project going on there that was started by the Department of Energy called the Project Pele, to be able to produce a small-scale reactor that you can literally put in a trailer and take anywhere in the United States. By the way, it has low-level nuclear fuel in it, so it's not something that creates a risk from a standpoint of weaponizable fuel. That is the future, to be able to do that. Kathy brings out a great point. We have to use energy more efficiently, and there are incentives there to be able to do that. But let's look at using nuclear power as a supplement to renewables. Renewables are great, but they won't do everything. I think if you do those things, the future of this nation's energy production and its energy usage and its energy efficiency is a bright one. But we have to go. Now, Project Pele will be completing here to have a reactor that's actually producing energy here within the next 12 months. Pretty incredible.
Yeah, I agree with Rob. The nuclear is absolutely important. The politics of the past on nuclear, I think folks have turned the page because we need carbon-free energy. That's why the Climate Committee recommended in a safe way extending the licenses of our existing nuclear fleet, providing tax credits, and hopefully we can get the technology that we don't want the Vogel, but you need the technology. I'm not sure if the small modular reactors, they're just not in the proven stage yet, so you need
You're mentioning a topic dear to my heart. I'm writing an article right now as we wrap this session up on America's ongoing weird strategic dependence on Russian nuclear fuel.
Yes.
Because we actually gave up a lot of that nuclear fuel producing capacity. Ernie Moniz told me for this piece, the opening line is, America is violating the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty by not supplying its allies with nuclear fuel as part of the treaty obligation. So anyway, we can go on and on and on.
Yes.
I mean, I love being up here with a bipartisan group of policy nerds that is actually trying to think seriously about this. So please give a round of applause to Representative Kathy Castor
Thank you all very
of Florida
much.
and
Thank you.
Representative
Please
Rob
stay
Wittman
engaged.
of Virginia.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work. And what you've done is you've given us a report here that we can come back in a year to the SAFE conference, SAFE Summit, and see how well you've done.
That's right.
Excellent.
It'll
Thank you all
be
very
on
much.
our report card. There we go.
Thank you.